Right.
Okay. Thank you, Dove. And so this is part 2 of the
Rabbi,
Shalom Bayit. Yes.
I just want to introduce Shoshi, my friend.
Hi.
Shoshi?
Shoshi?
Shosh.
So nice to meet
Shosh.
you.
I introduced myself already a couple of times. I only can present to you twice.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
ברוכה הבאה.
תודה רבה, ברוך
Okay.
נמצאים.
תודה.
And that's on record now.
Okay.
Yeah,
So last week not last week, it was a couple weeks ago, but last time we discussed that the Torah tells us it's not good to be alone, and that the real shleimut, the completion of a person comes about through a marriage, right? And yet we see that very often marriage could be a real pain. It could cause tremendous pain in someone's life. And we discussed that the Torah's instruction for marriage is that it teaches a person to move from being self-centered to being other-centered. And that it forces a person to be concerned about someone else, and really that is a tremendous step for a person to take in life, as one matures through life, to move the center away from oneself to the other. However, in relationships, anger is something which completely eats away at the bonds, at the connection, at the integrity of a relationship. So the Gemara tells a great story, which we will present to you. A great story about someone who had made a wager. He had said, I am able to make anyone angry. And someone else responded, there's no way that you can make Hillel get angry. And he said, I bet I can. And we're going to see from this story that this person was an expert at pushing those buttons which normally cause anger. So as we go through this Gemara, the story in the Gemara, I want you all to try to be tuned in to which buttons are being pushed here. Which situations are being created, which buttons are being pushed that are the anger pushing buttons, which really normally set a person off. So the Gemara said, right, whoever can make Hillel angry will get 400 zuz. That was the coinage in the time of the Gemara there. One of them said he was up for the challenge. The day was Erev Shabbat. Hillel was washing his hair. He's taking a shower, getting ready for Shabbat. One of the men passed by the entrance to Hillel's house, and he yelled out,
Who here is called Hillel? Who here is called Hillel?
Hillel wrapped himself in his cloak and went out to him. My son, the sage said, what is it that you want?
I have a question to ask.
Ask, my son, ask.
Why is it that the heads of the Babylonians are round?
You have a very important question. Hillel answered, because they do not have midwives that are alert. Okay? The man waited a short while until he gave enough time for Hillel to get back into his shower. Once he was sure that Hillel was back in the shower, he yelled out again.
Who here is called Hillel? Who here is called Hillel?
Hillel again wrapped himself in his cloak, went out and said, my son, what is it that you wish?
I have a question to ask.
Ask, my son, ask.
Why are the eyes of the Talmudians weak?
And Hillel answered, you have asked a very important question. Their eyes are weak because they live among sand dunes. The man waited enough time for Hillel to get back into his shower. And then he yelled out a third time,
Who here is called Hillel?
my son. After Hillel wrapped himself and came out inside. What is it that you wish?
I have a question to ask.
Ask, my son, ask.
Why are the feet of the Africans broad?
My son, you have asked a very important question. Because they live among the swamps. Frustrated, the man made one final attempt.
I have many questions to ask, but I'm afraid you might get angry.
Oh, ask all the questions that you would like to ask, Hillel responded. In desperation, the man said,
Are you Hillel, who's called leader of the Jewish people?
yes.
If you are, then may there be no more like you in Israel.
Why, my son? Why?
Because I have lost 400 zuz. Because of you.
Control yourself, said Hillel, concluding the exchange. It is better that you lose twice 400 zuz than Hillel become angry. Okay, what buttons are being pushed here that normally set us up to lose our temper and get angry?
Timing. I'm doing
Okay.
something else. I'm in the middle of something.
Okay, good. So one of them is the timing, right? When did this guy choose to come?
When the guy
Right. Well, first of all, Erev Shabbos.
He's getting ready.
Right? Now, Erev Shabbos, we might have noticed, is a time where things can get a little bit tense. Actually, there's a beautiful drush, I think it's from the Shla, that the pasuk says, Lo tavaru eish b'chol moshvoteichem, right? That on Shabbat, there should not be fire burning in any of your households. See, he says that's talking about anger. Because very often, it's when we're under pressure, and unfortunately, it could be Shabbat, something which we want to inculcate the home with love and with sweetness for the children, which can turn into a pressure pot. And famously, a person once went to the Steipler Rav and complained that it's ridiculous. Every Erev Shabbos, things get wild and crazy, and the house isn't ready, right? And my wife just doesn't have things ready. And he said, oh, he had a wonderful eitzah, wonderful advice for him. He said, pick up a broom, right? Help out, make it a little bit better. But certainly, as David is saying, first of all, there's the pressure, right? So he chose the most pressing time, Erev Shabbos. And, right? And as you said, when he was in the shower, right? So if I get bothered when I'm going to be discomforted, it makes it that much worse. Good. And he wasn't just taking a shower. He wasn't just busy. He was busy taking a shower, getting ready for Shabbos. And when a person has this self-righteous aspect, I'm doing something I'm doing a mitzvah, right? When a person is indignant because he's self-righteous, because he's doing a mitzvah, unfortunately, that can cause people to lose perspective. You know, the classic that someone wants to say Kaddish for a parent. Right? They want to lead the services. They want to be the chazan. But someone else also does. They get into a fight over who's going to lead the services, which is clearly missing the point. The whole idea of leading the services is to give Ilay Neshama, to give a zechut to the person who passed away. Right? But when we're involved in a mitzvah, so then it's very easy to, don't you bother me now. Right? Don't you see what I'm doing is holy, is kadosh, is important. So there's a self-righteousness aspect. So far this guy really knew when to push those buttons. Pressure time, personal discomfort, I'm involved in a mitzvah, good. What else is he doing over here? What other buttons is he pushing?
He's asking really It's kind of a silly question.
Good, beautiful, right? He's right. You know, it's one thing if I'm in the shower, Erev Shabbos, and I get a phone call, or I'm told someone's at the door. It's very important. Fair enough. I'll get out of the shower, put on my robe, go downstairs. But if it's just nonsense, then, right? So then that could totally push my button. And I totally lose it. You know, if something important, I'm willing to stop doing what I'm doing no matter what. Good. Nonsensical. What else?
Repetitiveness.
I'm sorry?
Repetitiveness.
Good. Right? He keeps coming back. Right? He kept waiting till he went back into the shower. Right? Now, if someone does something once, right? You know, they don't put the seat down, or they leave the underwear. You know, if it happens once, all right, we're willing to let it go, right? But when it happens again, and again, and again, that's where we say we reach the point, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? And that's the point that we lose it. And we don't just lose it over that, but then all of this anger, all of this frustration that's been simmering,
That's built up. That's right. That's when you lose it. And so that was the button he was pushing, was how many times can I keep on going back with these stupid questions, doing the same thing, that will finally, you know, the pot will boil over.
right?
Can we say, like, you know, the pinball machine, you're pulling it back, it's getting more power, more power.
And then it explodes.
Released out.
And then it explodes.
Then it explodes.
Good. There are a couple more. There might be more. I mean, I've got two more over here. How did he start off? Right? Who here is called Hillel? What's he doing by saying that?
Putting it down. You know, if a
antagonistic.
well-known movie actor, they wouldn't recognize the president, but a well-known movie actor,
Right.
everybody would recognize him. And you
So,
think it's hard to beat
so what normally, and I think this is key over here, what normally sets us off is what we consider an affront to our self-esteem. Right? I'm not being respected. I'm not valued. I'm not appreciated. Once we hit someone else's self-esteem, normally that's when the steam, EAM, will follow. Right? That's when the person really is going to lose it. So he started off right away with a smack to Hillel's self-esteem. Who here is called Hillel? Who here is called Hillel? Right? Completely dismissing Hillel and his importance. And then at the end, what does he do? He goes for the direct insult. What's the last thing he said? Right? If you're Hillel, there shouldn't be people like you in the world. Right? Already he's not being subtle, now he's going for a direct insult. Right? And before he did, he built him up. Right? Right? He said, right, if I ask you, you might become angry. No, I won't become angry. Well, so you're saying you're justifying becoming angry. And then he said to him, are you Hillel, the leader of the Jewish people? So now he's building the person up in order to then give that last jab. The last jab is, there should be no more like you in Israel. And Hillel stayed nice and calm, to the point that, what did Hillel say to him? Control yourself. Why is Hillel saying to him, control yourself? What seems to be happening?
He's getting
getting
the other guy.
Yeah. He's starting to lose it. Right?
You know, when you stay calm, when you're the one that stays calm, sometimes the other person does, because they didn't get you. And so.
Yeah. And as they, you know, whoever stays calm and speaks with this tone of voice is the person that's in control. And as the other one starts to escalate and get more and more upset and raise their voice and the tension's rising, and we don't do it in order to offset the other person. We try to de-escalate. We try to turn the volume down. But this was so frustrating for this person. So how did Hillel do it? Why? How was Hillel able to stay so calm? What could we say is a key towards not getting angry? Or
What characteristic
Yeah.
might?
One of the things that strikes me, and I don't know how I'll answer it, but it's when it's a stranger, it's a little easier to be calm because you're not invested in that person.
Okay. Okay.
So it's sort of interesting.
Yeah. That is true. That is true. And that's something that we actually touched upon, I think, last time that we discussed.
The expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I always say if you turn around suddenly as you're waiting for the light at Culver and Michelson, and you bump into a stranger, right? You say, oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry, right? If you're by your refrigerator, you turn around suddenly and bump into one of your kids, what do you say?
Shake it off.
What are you doing here?
Are you in my way?
Why are you hovering over here? What are you doing here?
Shake it off.
Yeah.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah. Right? So, yes, certainly, we take liberties with those that we're closest with. And also there are certain expectations from those that we're closest with that often are unreasonable. Right? So you're making a nice point.
And there's a history. If that person was in Hillel's life, you know, for decades, and this is something he always does. He always comes Erev Shabbos and always chatzim Chinek. I mean, wouldn't he maybe
I don't know.
stop?
I don't know.
Like enough I
Okay,
do.
so those are actually mitigating factors. Why perhaps it wasn't so hard for Hillel. But nevertheless, I would say, I know if I'm called out of the shower on a Friday because someone knocks on the door and they're told, well, the Rabbi's in the shower, well, this is an emergency. So I would certainly come out. If it would be for this nonsense 3 times in a row, at a certain point I would say, Natalie, handle the question, or I would get angry. Right?
Although it does take you have a long fuse. It takes
Yeah, that's true.
But my kids would say, because
one
it's
second,
also
don't turn this off.
No, but they, you know, it's interesting because you're 100% right that people who are close, you will say, yes, of course you can get angry, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, people will say my kids are.
And that's Devorah. She says you don't.
Oh,
well,
that's very good.
it's interesting to note.
Right.
Devorah is our 7th.
Right.
Right? And after you've gone through.
And if I ever say Devorah's name, he goes like this because she has a halo. There you go.
But the
No,
truth
you've got
is,
that.
after
This
you
is
go
true.
through teenagers and young adults, and then all the things that a 12-year-old, anything up to 12 can throw at you, you really have 13. Yeah.
Take it straight.
Right? But you have a
You've got
different perspective.
That's
Well, that was the thing I was going to say. He has sort of this global perspective that it isn't about him, and he can handle this because it's really just a moment in time, and
Okay.
he has a
it.
perspective.
So what would you say? So you're hitting on it. What would
He
you
has a perspective.
say?
He has a sort of a broader scope that helps it not be such a big deal.
Okay. Good. Right? Good. So at times, sorry?
He just wanted to.
Yeah, let me just comment on what Melissa's saying. We get drawn into the moment. We used to call it, we get sucked in. Right? And sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes you have to say, especially when you're dealing with your children
Yes.
or family member, and you have to stop and say, I'm not going to get sucked in. I'm not.
But you get sucked in. And sometimes, certain kids would suck you in, and other ones I would get sucked in, and we needed to
Help each other.
don't
It's like
pull them out,
the rope around the arm.
right? Don't, right?
Yeah.
So a person, I would say the key is when we're faced with situations that are about to trip us, you need to step back and try to get perspective. And Hillel, I imagine, stepped back and said, here is a rather silly, interesting character, right? But what did he say? It's better that you lose 800 zuz than I become angry. Meaning, I am not going to diminish myself by getting sucked into this ridiculous situation, this exchange over here. Good.
Well, there are two other issues or ways to deal with these things. One I learned from my puppy dog, which you didn't bring your puppy dog, so I have to make him...
Those weren't really mine, I just found those pictures, sorry.
So cute.
Anyway, my dog is highly sedated. Most of the time he spends sleeping. And so that's one way of avoiding, this emotional frivels.
Right, I wouldn't suggest that in terms of a
For your
spouse.
spouse,
or a child.
right?
Yeah.
Most of the time they're
But
sedated. That works out pretty good.
The other thing is, an example. My grandson spilled some wine on the tablecloth and he started to cry. Nobody was upset about it, but he cried. And it's an emotional response. And Hillel could have had an emotional response, but if you take an intellectual response, well, what's going on, and let's analyze it, and before I open my mouth, let's put my brain in gear first, then you're less likely to bring up the emotional response.
Okay, good. So another thing we want to talk about is the pause, right? Not P-A-W-S, right? The P-A-U-S-E, right? Right? Is the pause, right? To not react, right? To be in control. Now, I would say that at the root of Hillel's patience is the attribute of humility. Right? If I am Mr. or Mrs. so important, then how dare you speak to me, interrupt me, bother, right?
Put me down.
Right, or put me down, right? But if a person has, and Hillel was the epitome of humility, right? The Gemara says that in all of the debates between Hillel and Shammai, we rule like Hillel because Hillel always put the other opinion first. Whenever he presented an argument, he didn't just put the opinion first, meaning he worked through the other's opinion and then he presented his own. But often, we latch on to our approach and we categorically reject anyone
You
else.
missed my Talmud presentation.
I'm sorry?
You missed my Talmud presentation on Shavuos.
I missed it?
I gave an example of where Hillel had this ruling, and Shammai had this ruling, and Hillel redacted his ruling and taught according to the
Nice. Right.
Shammai.
Right. The Chatzi Evet.
Yeah, half
Chatzi ben Chorin.
slave, half free man.
I was there. I didn't miss any of it. I was there the whole night. Okay. The Gemara says that anger is like drunkenness. In what ways would we say anger is like drunkenness?
Out of control.
Okay.
You don't know when.
Number one is you're out of control. You're out of control. Right? You're not thinking things through, and good. Yeah, Dov, what did you want to say?
You don't know when you had enough. You don't know.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're out of control. You can't measure, you can't gauge what you're saying, what the reaction will be. Right? Also, I think, right, when you're talking to someone who's drunk, they'll start to philosophize. And they'll think that what they're saying is just so
Pearls.
insightful. Such pearls of wisdom. They've got such clarity that it just behooves them to share.
Clear in their mind.
Right, in their mind it's pretty clear, right? But we're not. And when we're angry, we think what we're doing makes sense. I'm going to show them but actually, whatever we do in anger ends up being counterproductive. Right? Punch a hole through the wall. Now, better the wall than someone. Better the wall than someone. Chas v'shalom. But who is one hurting from that anger? Right? Anger is like drunkenness. It's out of control. It is ineffective. And often it ends up hurting ourselves. And there's a famous story about this chassid. The family was impoverished. And he went and he sold his tefillin to buy an etrog, a beautiful etrog. Because he said, look, tefillin I don't wear on Sukkot. I need an etrog. So he sold his tefillin to buy an etrog. Well, his wife wasn't crazy about him selling his tefillin, but if he sold his tefillin, she could have used some chicken soup for the family. The money on the etrog is not where she would have directed it. And in her fury, she took the etrog and threw it onto the ground. And this person's response. Now, I'm not so clear. Sorry, I'm not so clear that that was the right move to buy the etrog. Okay, putting that aside. But his response was, "I don't have my tefillin. I don't have my etrog. Should I trade all of that in for anger? I'm not going to trade that in for anger." And he didn't get angry. The anger truly accomplishes nothing, and it just gets, it adds fuel to the fire. So number one is when we are confronted with a situation where our button is being pushed, number one is don't react immediately. As we were saying, don't get sucked in.
And I mean, I think that story, right, wrong, whatever, but I think that story is one also to just show that we make mistakes. And let's say by him selling that, maybe that was not thought out necessarily on his part and thinking he was doing something great, this, really enhancing this mitzvah. But the other side is that, and she got upset with him, that he could have felt, like we said, I'm doing this mitzvah, and how dare you?
Self-righteous.
Self-righteous. And that's where it stopped. I bet you that's where it stopped. Instead of escalating, that's where it stopped. And, we can make mistakes. And sometimes when we are the ones that make a mistake and we're sort of called out on it, we can't even go back. We can't, it just fuels it more because we sort of, we know we've made this mistake, and out of the embarrassment, even we might even not stop there and try to sort of
dig the hole deeper.
Exactly, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, not to react when our button is being pushed in any of these situations. Number one is, you can't trust yourself when you are in this pressure cooker type of situation. So you don't want to react, right? I say over and over, until you say it, you own it. Once you say it, it owns you. Okay? Before you say it, you're in control. Once you say it, often it comes back at you, right? It then owes you. There was a Hasidic Rebbe who had holy water. We should stop doing this. He had holy water that he would give out to couples, right? This holy water was when you're about to get into argument, right? You have to put some of this holy water in your mouth and hold it in your mouth for as long as you can. Right? This is the holy water. Right? And then the holy water could have its holy effect. Right? But I don't know how holy the water was, but the Shalom Bayit is holy. And, sometimes you don't want to trust yourself with a reaction, with saying something, right? And sometimes if it's a bit of a clash, sometimes it can be frustrating to the other person that you're not saying anything.
No, I mean, and I know, what he's talking about. When we first got married, I came from a family that was very verbal and whatever. And we would sort of say, not necessarily even anymore, but we would react, we would have a conversation. And I remember there were times where, I was upset about something, and he would just be very, very quiet. And I would just look at him and say something. Say something. And as, years went by, he said...
After a few years, I said something.
Yeah.
You start to talk after 7 years of marriage.
Very silent in our house for a long time.
7 years.
But you have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. And if you're not ready to... If what you're going to say is something that's going to be a little bit not thought out and might cause pain, and not what you really want to say, but if you're worked up, then I maintain my original position. That sometimes you just, right? It has to be discussed. You have to deal with it. But it has to be dealt with not when your blood is boiling. Right?
And it's interesting because over time, though, you sort of outgrow that, or you figure out each other and you're able to communicate in the way that works for you. So it's interesting when I look back, but that was because working on that and recognizing
and getting to know each other and know how the other one deals with situations. Right. And
so it takes work. It's the communication, and that it takes work, and knowing when to say, when not to say, is very important.
So when we wait, when we hit that pause button, so number one, right, Melissa, as you had said, you get a certain perspective. You can take yourself out of it, have this broader view, instead of being in the midst of it, sort of looking over it and saying, it's not such a big deal, right? I'm taking this. Maybe I'm frustrated about something else that's going on. I'm going to take this, right, and say, it's really not such a big deal. This is not something that I should be getting upset about. Very often when we pause, we realize that we might have misunderstood something, right? We might have misunderstood something. And in our minds, this is what happened, but that's not really what happened. Or we're taking it far out of proportion of what happened. Another advantage that we have when we remove ourselves somewhat is we can give ourselves the time and the headspace to try to judge favorably. Because as we discussed on Shabbos, right, if a person is able to judge others around them favorably, and sometimes it's hardest, like Arel said, sometimes it's hardest with those that are closest to us. The strangers, we can be such a big Baal Chesed, right? Such a big Baal Chesed. But with those closest to us, sometimes we can be short, we can be harsh. And the more we can judge others favorably, the better we treat others, the better the world around us becomes. And the better we treat those that are around us all the time, the better the world around us, the better our world, the world that we are involved with all the time, the better that becomes. right? And to realize whatever relationship it is, marriage relationship or whatever relationship we have, that those are the most precious gifts that we have. The most precious gifts that we have are the relationships that we have. And we always, when we're talking to a groom and bride before getting them ready for marriage, things we'll always discuss and just repeat and repeat. This is the key to your happiness for life. The two of you are good, life is good, no matter what else might be going on. If the two of you are not treating each other as you should, then no matter how much wealth, no matter what else, all the good things going on, life, right, is going to be miserable for you. So the most important thing is perspective, and unless we are tzaddikim like Hillel, who have such humility, I think the way that we can take that deep breath, draw ourselves out, and not get sucked into this whole acrimonious back and back and up and back that just keeps escalating, is to pull ourselves out and wait. Do not react. You shoot, it's going to get ugly. And it does get ugly. The Gemara says that anger is like idolatry. Kol hakoes ki'ilu oved avodah zara. Whoever gets angry, it's as if they worship idols. Now we know idolatry is one of the cardinal sins. So, one might want to say, oh, they're just saying just how serious it is, what a cardinal sin it is. But that's not how Chazal, that's not how the sages speak. If they say it's ki'ilo of avodah zarah, it means there is a real connection, a real parallel between anger and idolatry. What might that be? What sort of connection is there between anger and idolatry?
I always thought that it was about that if you know that Hashem rules the world and Hashem is placing a challenge in front of you or a difficult situation before you, then you know that it's Hashem's will and that it's a lesson for you to be learned, or it's an opportunity for you to grow, and you accept it because it's Hashem's will. But when you're angry about something, it's as if you've forsaken Hashem. Okay. If I could just sharpen that just a bit, right? Exactly as Melissa is saying. When I'm angry, why am I angry?
Because you don't like what Hashem is doing.
This should not, I don't like what happened. This should not have happened.
Sure it is.
Right? And if I were running this world, you can be rest assured I would have done a much better job. And I would not have allowed this to happen. Now, you might say, well, God didn't do this. He did it. She did it. But that's not how we view it. One of my Rabbein once said, my bechira, my free will, stops at your nose. Meaning, I have my free will, but anything that is affecting someone else, I have my free will, and without getting to this whole other sheer on this, I have my free will and I'll be held accountable for what I choose to do, but ultimately what comes to me from others is what I am meant to be dealing with. This is the menu and the amounts that God has directed my way for whatever reason, in general, for my self-actualization.
But you don't want to be the shliach. of, somebody
Right.
else's,
Right.
sorrow, somebody
Right.
else's pain.
Correct. We try to be, right? Everyone needs to try to be the vehicle through which Hashem sends His brachas to everyone. That's what we need to try to position ourselves as, right? We are the portal for bracha, right? And the portal for pain. If anyone else wants to step up for that, that's their prerogative. But we'll cede that role to others. But the anger is like idolatry. I know better. This should not be. And if something comes our way, we need to rise above it, recognize that this is a challenge, but I'm not going to get sucked in. I wonder if Hillel didn't think to himself, this is a challenge that Hashem is sending me for my patience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say, right, and that's what gave him the wherewithal to, my son, ask again, right, each time. Now, imagine, right before you have a situation that might really, really cause you to boil, if right before you get a text message and it says, get ready for a big challenge. God is going to test your patience in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Come in. And right then someone walks into my office. Right?
Yes. What would you like? What can I do for you?
Yes. Right? So how would we deal with that? Right? We got this text message from, right, guaranteed overnight delivery from God, G-O-D, right? We got this text message, right, that says you're going to be confronted with a challenge now to your patience to see, can you overcome it? Then the guy walks in, or whoever it is, and then we're confronted with that situation. What do?
Take it
We
a shot.
laugh. We laugh. I'm not going to lose my patience. I know exactly what this is. This is a setup. This is a setup. I'm not going to fall for the setup. If we can, take that deep breath. Right? Remove ourselves from that situation. Right? And think to ourselves, this is a setup. This is a setup.
Don't laugh. If your wife is mad at you and you, thank God, cell phone, it's a setup, don't laugh. Don't laugh. Keep it to yourself.
Okay? I agree. You don't want to say to her, I know this is a setup. Right? But in your mind, right, to say, I'm not, to think, this relationship is far too dear to me, far too important to me, to allow anger to get in the way and hurt, right? Potentially destroy this relationship. So we need to keep the boiling point down. And then it needs to be discussed. Right? There was something that got one of us upset. We don't want to let it get to anger. We might need to say, let's discuss this in a half hour. I'm going for a walk. Right? That is legitimate. That is legitimate. But then there need to be ground rules for this dispute, for this discussion, for this hard discussion that might come afterwards. Right? Number one is it's got to be private. Right? It should not be in private, meaning not in front of other people, not in front of children. Private also means
When it comes to children, I think that's sometimes
Yeah.
we react or we'll say something because it's a child, and if you ever need to rebuke or just you don't do that to a child
in front of
in
other.
front of other people.
Yeah.
It's very important to give them that respect, and that's the only way that they're going to be able to hear it from you and take it. And especially with children, I always found, and we did this sometimes. I would be home when they were younger, and Baruch Hashem, boys, and you have a lot of them, and your day is full, and and they can bring you to that boiling point. And sometimes a child needed to be punished.
Never our children. You speak
No.
theoretically.
Theoretically. They needed to be punished, but it couldn't come from me because I did feel a bit upset. And so sometimes it would be, that wait until your father gets home. But it wasn't wait until your father gets home because I don't want to deal with it. I can't deal with it in a level-minded sort of place. So it was wait until, because he came in and he had this great day out. And he
Playing tennis all day, right?
All day, just sitting there, right? And he was able to see it in a different way, and he was able to give the proper response. So sometimes you do need to remove yourself, but
Right.
never. And even with your children, you shouldn't do it sometimes in front of your other children. It's taking them away, and we do that often because it happens in the house. And something happens, unless sometimes it's a learning lesson, but to really, sort of point out some, a child's fault or misdoing or whatever it is really, it's embarrassing to them, and they won't be able to hear it, they won't be able to take it.
Rabbi, can I say really quickly this story? You probably know it. We're to go to Rosh Hashiva, had some really nice material to make a cloak. In the Talmud, he said, I want you to just cut off a hole in there. And he accidentally, so the Rosh Hashiva goes away. Talmud accidentally, he's really nervous. He folded it over, and when he cut it, there's 2 holes. So the Rosh Hashiva comes over there, he says, okay, this is the hole for my head. This is the hole that Hashem's trusting me with.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So and private also means not to discuss it with other people. This is something else also we always tell young couples, that they're going to have disputes, and obviously if it's something serious they might need to involve parents. But for the usual sort of things, you involve parents, you involve others, the two of you will work it out, but the parents are always going to have in their mind what he did to my daughter or what she did to my son. So you want to
And as older, parents, when you have older children, and sometimes you need to also be careful. I can't believe he just said that. I can't. You might say that to your child, and you're talking about their father, you're talking about their mother. That's damaging. That's not. So you do have to be very careful of what you say, who you say it to.
keeping it in-house, meaning between the two. Don't mention the D word. Okay? Once the word divorce is thrown about, it becomes a reality. So that's not something that one wants to in the course of an argument, that's not something that you want to bandy about. As we said, don't say things that you'll regret later. Right? We don't want to generalize because it turns into this. That's the cumulative that we spoke about before. You always, you never, right? And we start to bring up the history, right? You want to keep it focused on what's going on over there, right? We don't want to become, you start to psychoanalyze the other person. That goes over well. Most people really appreciate that coming from a spouse, a non-professional spouse. That doesn't work, right? Okay, so as we had started with in the first class, the purpose of marriage is to move from self-centeredness to other-centeredness, and to recognize that in any relationship, this is going to be a challenging and a growing process. And there are going to be many challenges along the way. And we can't allow the challenges to derail the purpose, right? In other words, if marriage, it goes back to a point that I say often, right? Why do bad things happen to good people, right? Why is there difficulty in life? So I always like to ask, why are there weights in a weight room? Right? So no one asks why there are weights in a weight room, because we understand, why do we go to a weight room? To challenge ourselves physically, and therefore we need to have weights, right? It would be a lot easier if there wouldn't be weights in there, we just wouldn't accomplish. So what's the purpose of life? Life is meant to have challenges in order for us to self-actualize, and therefore there's going to be challenges in life. That's why life is not going to be this perfect sailing. So let's apply it over here. If marriage is meant to be self-actualization by becoming less, moving from being self-centered to other-centered, there are going to be challenges along the way. So if we allow anger in, then we're taking those challenges, and instead of becoming other-centered, our anger are becoming more and more and more self-centered. I'm not being respected. My needs are not being met. It's all about me. So it's taking that which is meant to get us from point A to point B, the very tools that are being given to us to go from point A to point B, and we're using that to hunker down and completely lock ourselves into point A. So we can't allow the challenge to derail the whole purpose. And as we said, we learned last time we mentioned how Hashem changed the words that Sarah said when he spoke to Abraham. And he didn't say that Sarah said, how can I have a child if my husband is old? Hashem said, Sarah said, how can I have a child if I am old? If Hashem is going to change the words of Sarah because of the relationship between Avram and Sarah, which was pretty rock solid, and they were old, right? At this time, the ages were 99 and 89, respectively, right? So we see just how the words are so important. And if we allow words to come out in anger, they are the most damaging. And I think we could look back on our lives at things that were said to us in anger, and those words and those expressions remain with us decades later. And we also had said last time, that everyone has this need to be admired, to be appreciated, to be loved. That at our very core, that's what we all need and want, right? And certainly, right, those who are blessed to be married, certainly by a spouse, right? But in all relationships, that's what we crave, and that's in words and actions, with notes, cards, texts, whatever it is. If we can work on building those hugs that we give, those hugs that we keep giving in a relationship, whether they're physical hugs at times, and other times it's just emotional hugs with the thoughtful note, card, with texts. It's so easy to take out a few moments and share a sentiment. If we do that, then when the situations arise that can and do push our buttons, that will give us this setting, this basis of a relationship to make sure that even when those buttons do get pushed, that we don't allow that to cause us to react in a way that will harm that which is most precious to us.
So I just want to say, these are tools. And sometimes people might need help just sort of figuring out how to use these tools. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help, or because sometimes that communication is so important and you're just not getting there. And, you know, it's so important for people to just realize how important it is, and to work hard.
And to be
on the
willing to get help
relationship.
if help needs to be gotten. That's something that I never used to do when people asked me to be Masad Kedushin to perform the weddings. Something that I never thought of doing. And then over the years where I dealt with couples who were in need of help, and I had situations where the guy was willing to go, but the woman was not, or the woman was willing to go, but the man was not. And one of the things that I started doing is, if I'm going to be Masada Kedushin, I get a verbal commitment from the two of them, when we're all sitting together, when the four of us are sitting together, that if either one of them will feel the need for help, that the other one will commit to go and get that help. It's nothing's ironclad, but
Because obviously you have to be willing to work together.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, it's not
But-
the recipe.
But what Nalie's bringing up is so crucial, that if there's a point where there is a need for intervention, for guidance on how best to deal with these situations, then it is of crucial importance to protect that which is the most precious thing, right? To go and work on it and take care of it. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll call it over here. Thank you, though.